Hi, student. Tonight we'll be having a presentation on Visual Basic Programming. My name is Dr. Vanarvardhan Hamte from Mizoram University. I don't know, we are still less. So other student will obviously join and let's see how much they take. Okay, anyway, we have to move on because our time is also limit, and we may not be able to cover everything, every slides in 1 hour, but I'll try to go as basic as possible. So Visual Basic actually is the language that was developed by Microsoft to start the GUI on some small calculations such as database or maybe some files interactively, so user can just change the values to GUI components such as text box or maybe numerical spins or range adjuster and so on. So in Visual Basic, we have lots of things that we can discuss, not only for the web application. I mean, Windows application, there can be a web application development as well. We do have ASP and ASPX that is based on the Visual Basic language. So we can move on in our next slide. So the Visual Basic, as I said, is the powerhouse of the Windows. So all the Windows components were based on the Visual Basic from the early release. So we can see that the application development done from Microsoft was powered by Visual Basic language. Later on, C#, F#, and so on were developed, and even today, C# is very much a language, but it's almost similar with the Java. So still, the basic foundation, the starting was from Visual Basic as I had told earlier. So we can use several IDE or in development environment, integrated development environment. So that I'll discuss in the next slides. So first, let's see what Visual Basic actually is. So when we say Visual Basic, similar to C++, C, and so on, the Visual Basic is also it's a high-level language. So it's an event-driven programming language apart from the C and C++, but it is high-level language. So it is not assembly language or machine language, but it is very much understandable by humans when we see the code or when we write the code. It is just like we are writing the English language. So it's a high-level language. And we do have button clicks event, hover event, and so on for other components such as text, label, list, checkbox, radio button, grid view, and so many more are there. So as I said, Visual Basic language is developed by Microsoft. It is designed to make Windows application at first. So the development was simple. It was fast using that Visual Basic to do the GUI programming, and it is very much user-friendly, not something like C programming, C++. So Visual Basic is very much straightforward. So from code for the components, Windows component, we can simply see the components. We can drag those components from the toolbox, from the IDE, basically Visual Studio. So that I'll discuss later on. So what is Visual Basic? Visual Basic allows developer to create graphical user interface, GUI based application for both Windows and for web. And nowadays we have Xamarin, so that is for mobile application for cross-platform. So we can do drag and drop approach instead of writing complex code from scratch. All right. So to have a button, we can simply drag the button component from the toolbox in the form or in the web page area. So unlike traditional programming language like C, as I had mentioned, or maybe C++, the programmer have to, in C++, the programmer have to write for everything, for button, for label, for text, and so on. But Visual Basic provides pre-built component, as I said, button, text box, forms, etc. So a visual interface for designing applications. It is right. So it is already coming with simplified syntax for faster development as well. So these make VB especially suitable for beginners and RAD, rapid application development teams, right? So let me just discuss a small history on the evolution of Visual Basic. So Visual Basic 1.0 was developed or released in 1991. So that was the first UI-based programming language for Windows. All right, so that's a Visual Basic 1.0. So later, Visual Basic 6, VB6, was released in 1998. That was widely used for desktop application as well. And after that, Visual Basic.NET or VB.NET was released in 2002. Until these years, we still see several versions, modern versions, right? So it is integrated with .NET framework, right, from VB.NET. .NET is a .NET framework, right? So .NET depends on .NET framework. So starting from .NET 1 framework, and it comes up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on, right? So now we know that VB.NET is not just an upgrade, it is completely redesigned language that support object-oriented language as well. So OOPS, in short, object-oriented programming language, it's fully support, right? So the performance of the programming language is good. It's very, very good performance. It has very better performance, right? So the integration with modern technology is very easy, such as networking, SOAP, API, and so on. So it's very, very easy. So what are the features of Visual Basic language? So it is, number one, was easy to learn. So it is very simple, like English, like English like syntax. So it's very much suitable for beginners. All right. So that's point number one. So point number two is event-driven programming language. Event means when we mouse hover or when the mouse enter a button, some action happens, right? So that's an event, right? So code runs in response to user action, such as click, input, typing something. As soon as you press P, something happens. As soon as you take your finger out of that P key, and something happened or something like that. So those are called event. So all those event can be triggers, right? So third is a rapid application development. That time I had said. So RAD, or rapid application development. So you can simply drag and drop the components such as button, radio buttons, or checkbox, or maybe combo box, what you call. So it's very much a rapid application development, right? So fast development process. So number four is object-oriented programming language. It support object-oriented programming language, right? Oops. So VB support classes, inheritance, and polymorphism. All right. So point number five is strong integration with Windows. So we know what is Windows. Nowadays we have Windows 10, Windows 11, right? So it's easy to create Windows-based application using VB.NET. All right. So what application can be developed using VB.NET? That time I had mentioned desktop application, database application, business software, right? So we can also develop games and utilities, right? Automation tools, and even web page. So, but for web page, we have to use ASP and SPX. ASP, active server pages, all right? So extended active server pages is also there. So what's the advantages of Visual Basic then? So we already know that it is user-friendly, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is reduce coding efforts, because components are already shipped along with the IDE. So we have to just do drag and drop. And also it's a quick development cycle, right? Because of the available segment of codes or maybe available components. So we don't need to write from the scratch. So number 4 can be Visual Basic is having very large community and support. All right. So many people are using Visual Basic for development of our Windows application. So community is large. So we don't need to think this is a new programming. So maybe there is no support. Maybe no one is using. So we don't have to fear on such. So it already has a large community and support is also great with documentation and so on, right? So next is if we talk about the advantages, so we always have the limitation as well, right? So what are the limitation? So maybe we have less control compared to low-level language. So if you want to control, if you want to work with the hardware, maybe some kind of limitation is there, right? So next thing is mostly it is only Windows oriented, right? So even though it is a cross-platform support system is there, we can run the .NET framework on Mac, on Linux or operating system environment, but some kind of limitation is still there always. So therefore, it is very good for Windows, but may not be very good for Linux, right? So some kind of limitation will be there. So thirdly, we can have the performance limitations if we want to develop very much complex system. All right. So because it is controlled fully by the Microsoft .NET framework base, therefore developing games, developing some kind of enterprise level program may be somehow having some limitation, as I had discussed. So what are the tools used in Visual Basic programming language? So to develop VB application, developer can use integrated development environment IDE, as I had said earlier. So we do have Visual Studio currently. If I'm not wrong, it's a Visual Studio 2020. All right. So Visual Studio is a primary tools. So Microsoft developed that Visual Studio, and we may see several versions. So that I'll discuss those in the next few slides. All right. So it provides everything: code edit, Visual Studio provide code editor, right? Design tools, debugging tools, compiler, and also some separate tools can be done, like using plugins or separate components. We can develop far more better UI as well, right? So if you have any question, you note down. Later on, you can ask me always. All right. So there are some alternative tools for the Visual Studio Code. Some alternative tools are also there, but they are not like Visual Studio fully. So maybe it is code based. All right. So we always prefer Visual Studio for the IDE for Visual Basic programming. All right. So let's move to the next slide because there are some slides. So we have, as I had already said, instead of writing everything from the scratch, for the developer, they have to write the code, so much code. So instead of that, we do drag and drop, as I had already mentioned. So from code to click, right? So the phrase from code to click actually represents the transformation in programming introduced by Visual Basic. All right. So earlier, like even for Java programming, they have to write each and everything from the scratch. So later on, after this VB was released, then Java also create NetBeans and JBlue and so on for GUI programming. All right. So Visual Basic was the foundation for this GUI drag and drop. So we should remember that. So moving from the complex coding, text-based coding, I should say, to interactive user-driven application. All right. So that's the basic stands for code to click. All right. So Visual Basic simplifies software development. by allowing developer to, number one, design interface visually instead of just code. All right. So second is we write minimal code because many codes are already coming hand in hand. I mean, snippet code is there, many more are there. All right. So later on, this thing you can see when you do practically. All right. So response to the user action such as mouse hover, mouse click, key press, key up, and so on. All right. So traditional programming and Visual Basic, if you compare, so there can be lots of things that we can say. So in the early days, desktop programming, I mean desktop application was developed from scratch. We already know like C, C++, right? So in today's era, it's a rapid UI development. So we use Visual Studio IDE. So as I had said, development is quite fast. Also, we just do drag and drop. All right. So there are some components. It's like we use the form designer to create the application layout. All right. So we can add controls from the toolbox. What are the controls? Such as buttons, label, text box, and so on. All right. So the steps, this type of drag and drop focus on the what user see is what they get. All right. So the developer designed the interface similar to the drawing layout, just drag and drop. All right. So we will also see what happened in mouse click and so on. So let's move on. So in the screen, we can see that we have Windows Form common controls. So the first one is the pointer, right? So under this command control, so button is this simple button, right? So we do have button, and we can change the text, we can change the size of this button. So this is a button control. So next we have checkbox, checklist box, combo box, date time picker, label. We do have link label, list box, list view, and so on. Many more are there. So here we can see that it's a pointer, as we can see there. So the difference between this and this is this toolbox contain the default components from the Microsoft, but this toolbox contain the custom toolbox control. This may be from the third party. All right, so we can use the third party package. We can use those components in our forms as well. So that's depend. If you want to purchase the third party components, they are looking very much beautiful. Sometimes you can develop as if it is a Mac OS environment, or maybe a Ubuntu environment, and so on. And totally you can customize, right? So the components are there a lot. So from third party and even the inbuilt Microsoft one, Microsoft components are too good, and we have most of what we need. All right. So this down here, we can see that it's a panel control, right? So we can have forms inside the forms, another forms, or maybe a panels, and several grouping can be done as well. All right. So when I say toolbox, you might be wondering like it's a box where we keep a hammer, nails, plier, and so on at home. Something like that. Some kind of useful stuffs are there, right? So the toolbox is a panel in the Microsoft Visual Studio IDE that contain collection of pre-built controls. All right, so what are the pre-built controls? Buttons, checkbox, and so on, as I just read out that time. So that we can use to design the user interface of an application. All right, so the toolbox is central to Visual Basic drag and drop development model. All right, so instead of writing code to create interface element, developer can what? Select a control from a toolbox, drag and drop it, right? Drag it into the form, customize it. As I said, from the properties, these are the properties. I don't know whether we can see or not in the screen. So as soon as we have a component on the screen, we will have access to these properties. All right. So we can change the properties around, we can customize it around. So this significantly reduce the development time and complexity. All right. So we can just change some value, drag and drop, and so on. Otherwise, if we have to write with the code, then it will take lots of time searching which line it is and so on, right? So what are the key functions of this toolbox? So it provides ready-made UI component. All right. So these are the UI component. So this UI component, we should always remember. So it enables a visual design for the applications, right? So also this toolbox support rapid application development. As I said, if we are not satisfied with all these pre-built component, we can go with the third-party components as well. So the third-party components, but then mostly they are paid version. So free version are also obviously there, but mostly they are paid version. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So how to organize the toolbox? So we have a command controls here. All Windows form will contain each and everything. And also we have a container. These are the container. So we do have containers, menu and toolbars will be separately there. And data components for connecting to data or maybe data files, database, and so on. Those kind of category will be there. So we can explore it around, right? So how toolbox is used then? So we just have to open it, then drag, as I said. All right. So it's quite simple. So label is here. So what this label do? Label will simply display some text. All right, some text information on the form. That's all. So what this button do is it create a button which the user can click or mouse hover or maybe drag around as well. So those are the things. All right. So in the next slides, we have in the next slides we have the core strength. Why Visual Basic is good for Windows GUI programming. So Visual Basic, especially VB.NET, actually is widely used for developing Windows-based graphical user interface GUI application. I had already mentioned that, right? So its design philosophy emphasize number one, simplicity. Number two, productivity. All right, and number three was rapid development. So making it particularly effective for building user-friendly desktop application. All right. So what makes Visual Basic language strong for GUI then? Because of the GUI design tools such as component and so on. So it's also driven event-driven programming, right? So it's very much rich in libraries as well, components, maybe Windows components also can be imported. So still, it is very much rich, right? So this allows the developer to focus more on application logic and user experience rather than the low level. Okay, so for low level it may not be good, but for high level it is very good. All right, so what's the core strength of the Visual Basic? So it's a rapid application development, as we always said, that rapid application development, right? So that is the one of the core. So developer can easily create fully function application in a short time without writing extensive code. All right. So it also eliminates the needs to manually code UI layout because we can drag and drop. All right. So it's reduced error and efforts. So to create buttons, you may need to spend maybe an hours if you have to write the code from the scratch. But with Visual Basic, just click and drag. That's 1 second, right? So that's the difference. So as we had also said, it's event driven. So how mouse hover and so on, we can simply set the event in simple way. So the rapid application development, intuitive interface, event-driven programming, all these have to be the core strength of the Visual Basic, and then that's the reason we choose as well. All right. So now we come to the design and code. All right. So design and code, the Visual Basic workflow. So the Visual Studio provides a unified environment. All right. So where you design your interface visually while writing codes in SSM panel. So you see all the output in real times, the compilation times, and so on. So we'll see from the console example, we do have console application as well, not only GUI. We can do both console and the GUI for using the Visual Basic language. All right. So let's see a small example here. In this example, we have a module called program, right? So these modules defines which is a container for code, right? So it's defined in VB.NET. Console application executes start from the module always. So it is like a main function. All right. So main class that was that include the main function. All right. So we always have the modules. All right. So the modules define the container, as I said. So inside these modules, the module is named program. All right. So anything it can be, but this one is program. So inside this we have main function. Sub main means we are just writing the entry point. So when this program is executed, it should always start the application from this block. All right. So main, it's a compulsory. Well, if we do not have main, then how do we run the program? So there is no entry point. So this is the entry point. It's like a door. Okay. If you have to enter the class, then you have to enter through the door. So this is the door. All right. So in the next line, we do have console.write this, right? So console means in the console, we want to write something. So we pass it the string hello world. So we just pass this. Then after that hello world from the console, we just wait for a user to enter something character, maybe 0, maybe 1, maybe enter key, maybe space, or maybe arrow key up down, or maybe exit escape key. So we just wait for the user input. So we put a read line. So read line waits for user inputs before closing the console. All right. So if you do not have this line, it will simply, and then in the blink of eyes, the console will just get closed. So we have to keep this read line in order to see this output. All right. So that's that simple it is, right? I think it is not difficult to understand. I hope so. Okay, so let me just quickly revise what is this program for. So the program starts from the main. So it prints hello world, right? So in the console write line means print. Okay, so it just print hello world on the screen, and it wait for the user input. So when user press any key, then it's exit. Okay, so that's it. That's the console program. All right. So let's now discuss about the command center. I mean, before that, let me go with the Visual Studio version. All right. So in Visual Studio, we have several versions already. So why we talk about the Visual Studio in the Visual Basic Language Programming? Because the Visual Studio is the main IDE we use for developing the GUI, right? So even for console. So we need to know the basic. Okay, so between 1997 and 2010, this Visual Studio logo was also something like this. Okay, so we do have this, but the actual logo which came in 1997 was Microsoft Visual Studio 97, something like this. And later on, we do have 6.0 and so on. And Visual Studio.NET, these are the logos. So all this stuff were the real applications logo, right? So in 2002 to 2005, we have Visual VB.NET or Visual Studio.NET. Then 2005, we do have Visual Studio 2005, 2008, and we do have 2010 and 2012, 2017, 22, and now the development is ongoing also, right? So personally, I had used all this stuff. So starting from all this stuff, I had used it. I had not really tried all this VB6. I had tried. It was quite long back, but during my bachelor studies, BCS studies, I had used Visual Studio.NET, and then we jumped to 2005, 2008. Like after I graduated also, I keep using it. Then till today, I still have this Visual Studio IDE. All right, so Visual Studio Code also comes in hand. But Visual Studio Code does not give us the GUI component, so it's a code base. But Visual Studio comes along with many components. All right, so we do have several versions, such as Professional, Enterprise, and Community. Community version is free. You can always try out the Community version, so it is free. And Professional and Enterprise are not free. You have to pay some amount, but if the institution has some access, then still sometimes they provide free access as well. All right, so I don't know in MZU we do provide this or not, but Community is always there. It's free. You can always try out. All right, so okay, let me go back in the command center. So what actually is command center mean? Like in Visual Studio, actually it acts as a center command center, I should say, for developing VB application. It provides the integrated environment, right? So we already discussed it's a design user interface, write and manage code also can be done, debug and testing also can be done, compiling also can be done. We can build and we can deploy software also. All right, so everything is in one hand, okay, in one application. That's why it is called a command center. All right, so Visual Studio Code, sorry, I keep saying Visual Studio Code, excuse me for that. Visual Studio actually is a command center, as I just said. So instead of using separate tools for coding, designing, and testing, everything is done in Visual Studio, right? So instead of having different tools, so that's why these all-in-one tools improve productivity, efficiency, and accuracy, right? So if we test with this Visual Studio, it works, means it will work, right? So there are components. So there are form designers, toolbox, solution explorer, properties windows, code editors, output windows, debugging tools, workflow in Visual Studios. Those are there. So you can explore such, then you keep writing your programming. So I think you'll catch up easily. All right. So let's dive into a deeper Visual Basic application. So that time we had discussed the console application, right? So now in the screen we do have a form application. So what do you think that I spent for this form? So I just open the application, right? So both way, like for the user drag and drop and the code base, the editor have to be open only, right? So let's assume that the editor is open. So the form is already there. In this case, form is there. So from the toolbox, I just drag a button, then I just change the text to be displayed to click this. That may be around 1 second altogether, okay, or maybe 2 seconds at the most. And again, I drag label down here and then I change. So altogether, it may be 5 seconds. All right. So do you think that you can complete this whole writings, this code in 5 seconds? I don't think, right? So this, okay, this one is, something is wrong. Anyway, this text is form 1. Here I already gave it as Hello World app. So think that it is a Hello World app here already. So instead of writing this, when I drag and drop the component, this code will be generated automatically where I keep. And then from here, the center X, center Y, center X horizontally, center Y vertically have to be calculated. So this thing have to be added. And then I just put the location left and top and so on. So this small thing can be customized, right? So that also can be done from the properties also if you want. Lots of things are there. All right. So it's a center align and so on are there. So let me explain this code in short. When we run this code, it will start from where? From the class. So code runs from the initialization control, right? So we do have initialization of text that will contain Hello World app for the form, okay, for this form. So the start position is center screen. This form will open in the center screen, will be open in the center screen. All right. So secondly, we do have buttons and label, right? So these buttons and labels are created using what? Drag and drop, right? So what's the code? So we do have dim. Dim is just like declaration of the variable. So btn is a object variable for button. All right. So dim button as new button. So we can use that btn.text equal click this, right? So button dot auto size equal true. So we can auto size it also, right? So that is there. And label also, we do have dim lbl as new label, right? So we do have hello world there. So we set in the properties, we can set the size true. All right. So when we set from the properties, this code is generated, this particular code. And when we add the button in the component, this thing happen. All right. me.controls.add btn from this one. So this is a control, right? So in this button is added into this form. All right. So that's how it goes. So the alignment is checked and so on. I think that's all we can explain from here. If you want to go further, you can always go further. So this form designing needs some practice. All right. So there are many things you can do with this. This is a simple code. All right. So beyond Hello World, what we can do is the Hello World program is the starting point always in any program. You may have seen in C programming, C++, and many other languages. So Hello World, we keep writing, right? So that's always the starting. However, in real world, like when you try to develop application, it's required more than that simple output, right? As we just see in the screen. So we have to develop the application. We need to keep buttons and so on, right? So moving beyond Hello World means developing the ability to accept user input, right? So user click, that is also input. User have typed their username, that is also input, right? So once they do that input, we need to process it. Then we need to build the integrative application. Then connects to external systems such as files or maybe database, right? So we need to process that. So this stage actually transform you to a practical developer. All right. So to become a practical developer, you have to work on, right? So secondly, from basic output to interactive program, you need to handle input and output. All right. So use input control such as text box to receive data, or maybe some kind of spin or what do they call scale, right? So then display the output using label or maybe message box. So the program becomes useful when they can interact with users, all right? So not just display a fixed message. So some kind of interactive stuff should happen. So user will like it. If your application, the application you develop is just a static things, if it is not much interactive stuff, then user might not be interested much. All right. So decision making should be there. There should be some kind of control statement or maybe condition statement. If else, if then else statement, right? So if the mark is greater than or equal to 50, then down there we have to display pass. Otherwise, fail, and so on. So that such type of condition statement should be there behind the visuals, right? So those things should be there, and then loop repetition, such as for loop, while loop, do while loop, those things can be used, right? So what is loop then? Loop allows a repeated execution of some block, right? Some code. So it's very much useful for processing multiple inputs. So also for performing repeated calculation. All right. So we have to take care of such kind of data control. So working with controls and event, like event hunting mouse over on key press and so on, button click, or maybe text change, those things also can be handled. All right. So control interactivity, multiple controls actually can work together. So user enters some number, button is clicked, and result is displayed, and so on. Maybe the percentage, the total, the grade, division, and CGPA score, and so on. Those things can be done in a very much interactive way also, right? So we should know what's variable, right? So in the previous screen, we do have dim LBL as label, for example. So the LBL, that was the variable, right? So the data types is label itself. So we do have variable and label together coming. So those type of things we should take care. We do have integer, string, double, boolean. So we need to choose the correct data type to ensure the efficiency of the processing when we process the data. All right. So next thing you have to take care is the file handling. So file handling refers to read and write data into file. All right. So we should be able to read, we should be able to write, and also we should be able to append it. Or sometimes we need to delete something, so we should be able to delete. Okay, so appending is basically updating or maybe deleting some portion or so on. So file handling actually it allows data persistence beyond program execution. Okay, so beyond program execution, users should be able to do something, store the data, manipulate the data, and so on, right? So saving user data, reading configuration files, like a window size or the database site or URL or maybe IP address, those things have to be stored in the configuration file, right? So those things should be done. All right. So next thing is data connectivity, database connectivity. All right. So connecting VB application to the database. So we need something like a student management system or maybe inventory system. In that case, we always need to connect to database, not only in a single file. So we should work with the database. Database actually is also a file, but encrypted in an encrypted form, and also indexing. Many things are there. Just not just a basic input output file handling. All right. So next thing we need to take care is error handling. So we should use try catch block. All right. Try catch, try catch. Then also there is one more thing, final. So when we try something, if it is not working, so the catch block will do something. So try is done, catch, nothing is catch, then finally it comes to the final. All right. So final is not a compulsory stuff, so it's an optional. So we should be able to take care of such crash handling when unexpected error happen. So we should be able to handle crash. All right. So as we had mentioned that VB.NET is an object-oriented programming language. So it supports class, object, inheritance, right? So that VB will, I mean, that features, OOPS features will help organizing our code and even improve reusability. All right. So when we want to build a real application, we should take care of all this. So I don't know what comes in your mind, but in my suggestion from me, you can go with calculator application, start designing the simple calculation, calculator application, then also start having login form or login system kind where user type their email and their password, then button to click login, and to log in. Okay, so when that is done successfully, when the authentication is successfully done or verification is successfully done, then the dashboard system or else maybe form-based data entry system, all right, and mini management system, mini project you can do. So those type of thing you keep rolling it, like library management system and all also. I had kept complete tutorials for library management system using VB.NET on YouTube. So you can go to youtube.com, then you can search for that. If you need code, then you can request from there. What I had mentioned, my email, my contacts are there. All right. So you see the description area also. Okay. So let's go to the next slides. So Why VB is a strong choice? I had already discussed somehow. So Visual Basic is still a strong choice for Windows UI till today. All right. So there's a lot of proven track records. So decades of successful uh, development language it is. So Windows applications are created across that across industry using VB language and C Sharp. So from finance to healthcare to education. So I had seen lots of application that was developed using VB, that was developed using C Sharp. Either way, um, that was that were used in schools, college, in some small shop, even in medium shop. Many are still on the run. All right, so it is still very much useful. So as I had said, the curve of learning of VB.NET, I mean VB Visual Basic Language, is very much in a good shape. So its ease of learning is all right compared to um, C and C++ also. All right, C and C++, they are actually very much foundation, but compared to C++ and C Sharp and so on, VB is still much easier, right? So it is something like Python nowadays, but Python has some other things. It does not come with a native kind of GUI programming, but then still VB language or Visual Basic Language is very much easy to catch up if you want to learn. All right. So thirdly, if you want to continuously develop not only the with UI, you can go with the component X and so on developing also. I want to give you some good idea out here. If you want to develop um, something like a third-party software, as we can see here in the screen, something like this. Or maybe if you want to skin it, I mean theme, skin or theme form. So you can do it. It's easy, right? In Visual Basic Language, it's very easy. You can create a custom theme and you can sell those on websites where many developers are there. So I have done that a lot. Even some Chinese had purchased lots of my programming stuffs. So you can do the same, right? So back in my bachelor studies days, I had done BCA. So I had even sold all those stuff. So why you can't do? You can also do, I think. So you keep programming, keep learning, you can really sell it. All right. So since BCA is a professional language, there are lots of things to be explored. All right. So in this GUI programming, or maybe it's a console programming, VB language is great start, great language, and it has very rich component. So we should not shy away from VB.NET or VB language. So VB language, actually nowadays we use the .NET framework, therefore we can also say VB.NET. So not only Visual Basic, but the language foundation itself is Visual Basic. All right. So if you have any question, let me open the questions panel. So you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question. All right. If there is no question, then we stopped here. Um, and you can drop me as a okay. So you can reach me out if you want uh, in my personal website also. I'm just giving you in the chat link. I mean in the chat. I'm just keeping the link. If you want to go ahead, then you can just grab it out. Um, then you can always drop me an email. All right. So drop me an email. Sometimes I don't respond the WhatsApp easily because I don't use the phone easily. I mean, most of the time, I used to keep engaged in writing and so on. So email is more important for me. Therefore, drop an email. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you do well in your further studies. Thank you.